now hear from Shannon Taylor, who is the attorney who witnessed and was involved with the investigation of Rabbi Meir Kahane's murder.
Where does it go? I talking here? Does this work? Hello, Chevra. Happy New Year. Happy Hanukkah. Past. We should celebrate the fact that we're all here. And we should celebrate the fact that the legacy of Rabbi Kahane and Binyamin Kahane is still strong. And we should also celebrate the fact that the unbelievable censorship, an unbelievable curtailment of education and religiosity, and Jewish nationalism, pride, was not quenched by the zeal of their enemies. We are still strong, and we are still proud, and we are still educated, and the youth out there is eager and ready to continue to claim Israel and to claim our rights here in America. And for this, we should shout out for joy. I don't know of any other person, not Castro, not Stalin, not Mao, I don't know of anyone that there was such a deliberate attempt made to blot out the name, the reputation, the accomplishments, and the legacies of than the Kahane family. I don't know of anybody else. But it was primarily done not by Gentiles, but by Jews and by Jewish leadership, many of whom studied and learned under Rabbi Meir Kahane and Benjamin Kahane. And I don't know if you realize either that you have perpetuated the legacy of Rabbi Kahane and his yeshiva because of Rabbi Binyamin Kahane and Talia Kahane. When I was at the tragic, unbelievably sorrowful assassination, and that was a term given by the New York Post, not by us, to the murder of Rabbi Kahane by Said Nosser Yamach Shemo, there was a complete void, a complete schism. We had no idea what was to follow. And in that void came Binyamin Kahane. And he had to be ensconced by force, by debate, by years of strife from his family, from the yeshiva that we had struggled so hard to make in Jerusalem for the Kahane idea. And he had to create a Kahane Chai as opposed to a Kach. And I immediately was drawn to him, this thin, pale, handsome, newly married, young, gifted individual who couldn't speak a word of English and who was told, you will never amount to what your father was. You are the most mild of the whole family. You were specifically kept away from everything that your father was out doing. And yet he was driven, and nothing held him back, and nothing held him from his mission. And he learned not only English, as of course he knew Hebrew and Yiddish, but French. And what he built in Israel at the time of his murder was an infrastructure stronger than his father's. And he wrote not only in the Jewish press, but all over the world. He was a prolific writer like his father, like his uncle, Noam. He was erudite, he was a scholar, he was a biblical scholar. And nothing dissuaded him. His energy, his zeal, his commitment was unrivaled and unmatched. And the hurdles he had to overcome were amazing. He was ushered into this country by the trial of the murder, Noser, of his father. And he was the only one at that trial before Alvin Schlesinger in Manhattan to charge the Noser, a defendant, at the stand, and he was arrested for it. And he was published in all the newspapers as he called him for the murderer that he was. And when years later, they had a Kahane high office, and there was literature only in this office. Books like we have here. Nothing different than the books we have here, literature here, that has been on display in every bookshop. Educational and religious. The FBI under Director Frey, under apologies from Director Frey, came and raided the office and took all the literature and the DVDs in one day. And then there was this massive march by his supporters across the Brooklyn Bridge. A kid who came here young, without English, and able to mass in a few years this huge march across the Brooklyn Bridge against a raid by the director of the FBI. Imagine it. We don't even have that going on today. It hasn't happened with one Jewish organization. Now, I had introduced him to his first meeting with the press at Fox, to Eric Shawn. He was interviewed innumerable times. He was as gifted with the press as was his father. And I brought him to temples and to schools and to auditoriums, to concerts here in America. And wherever he went, he had a smile. He was gracious. How many of you met him? Did you ever see him angry?
No.
Did you ever see him lose his temper?
No.
Did you ever see him get into a fight with anybody?
No.
Did you ever see him lose a debate or a discussion?
No.
Did you ever see him at a want of an answer?
No.
Did you ever see him shirk a task or a responsibility?
No.
And for all of this, he and his wife were murdered in Israel on a drive-by shooting. And at that time, drive-by shootings were rare, as was mentioned by the host. They were rare in terms of atrocities of terror, but they were even more rare in terms of drive-by shootings. Israel turned a deaf ear and a blind eye to this shooting for the longest time, and as a result, the drive-by shootings multiplied just like the acts of terror in America, when the trial of Rabbi Kahane was dealt with so unjustly that it had to be retried, that Noser had to be retried in federal court when the World Trade Center went up in smoke in 1993 by the same plotters who murdered Rabbi Kahane, because Noser was still in jail. But because I had photographed the murderer and his gun, he was still in jail and the records were still there to be reviewed. Although they hadn't been read, they could still be reviewed, and the gun charge, thanks to my photograph, kept him in jail until and through the first attack on the World Trade Center, so they could now open their eyes, the federal and state authorities, and see it was a conspiracy. But what happened in Israel when Binyamin and his wife were murdered, and they shot at his children as well? It had never happened before. It was like the Romanovs in Russia, where they took the Tsar and the Tsarina and their children, and they executed them. Except there were the monsters of the Tsar. Here was a holy family on the way to school to take the kids on a secret route known only to the government. Here in New York, Ari Gottesman, another teenager, and myself, we were able to chase the assassin, see him caught and shot by a postal inspector, and tried and kept in jail. How in Israel was it possible that for the longest time no one was arrested? Then they finally found one person, and I don't know if they got a few more. How was it in Israel there was nobody to go up and prove and show who was behind this conspiracy? Arik Sharon was the prime minister. He yelled and bellowed louder than ever, but you know what they say about the loudest voice? The loudest voice conceals the biggest sins. A few years later, the so-called Gandhi was murdered in an Arab hotel that he was known to and friendly with. And again, Sharon was prime minister. And then after that, they had the Gaza withdrawal. Now, Israel's not our enemy. Israel is our only hope. But why aren't these mysteries explored? The judges in Israel are appointed. Here they're elected and appointed. An analogy has been made to the president-elect Donald Trump. I knew Donald Trump for decades. This is a person who does not shirk any responsibility either, who goes up against anybody and everybody, and who is out there to win. And thank God, he seems to be on Israel's side. I never knew a day of anti-Semitism from him. His whole family and his corporation and his lawyers and his leaders are all Orthodox Jews or Jews. His own first daughter converted by Orthodoxy. And yet, you would think there was no anti-Semitism until he was elected. All of a sudden, anything and everything associated with Donald Trump became anti-Semitic. Whereas you had the most malevolent anti-Zionists on the Democratic side, and you had no one there on the Republican side except people saying no more two-state, move the embassy to Jerusalem. Donald Trump was the anti-Semite. Everything Orwellian, everything turned upside down. White is black and black is white. And now he's president, and the incumbent has a resolution at the United Nations that now says Israel doesn't have land for peace. Israel doesn't have land to give. The land that Israel has is not for Israel. It's already given for a Palestinian state, and Israel better not tread on it, including the Temple Mount and the Western Wall. This has been decided with an American veto. And this is our beloved country. And imagine if Donald Trump was not there in the wings saying, "Hold on, Israel, I will soon be the president and do my best to correct the situation." What would be happening now? And Binyamin Kahane was the Donald Trump of his day. He was there against all odds. He was there the dark horse. He was there without support. He was there with his own people against him. And he unified them. And he brought the yeshiva to his side and his family to his side. And he brought the people of Israel to his side. And he had offices arranged throughout the country. And that's when he was murdered. But that doesn't happen in this country. Thank God. And God preserved the president and president-elect of this country so that the justice and mercy shall reign. In Israel, we always are worrying. But here in this country, Rabbi Kahane was murdered. Not in Israel, but here. And Benjamin Kahane was murdered in Israel. Both murdered. Was it by chance? Is it so easy to kill people? And how come others, thank God, do not get killed? Why aren't more people investigating the murder of Benjamin Kahane instead of forgetting about him and his wife? This was also an assassination. A leader of Israel, a political force, and his wife, and this was an assassination of a family. As if you had the King and Queen of England or of Austria in World War I, which started World War I. Why is it this started nothing in Israel? You had now a vacuum again. So important was Benjamin Kahane that you had a complete vacuum after he was silenced. Now you have people like Moshe Feiglin coming to Israel with a party. Zechut, liberty, identity, purpose. And what are the goals of this party? A Jewish state, a liberty state, family and community, leaving socialist roots behind in a state of abundance, a sovereign state, our homeland, all land sacred, and never giving appeasement. Are these novel thoughts? No, they're Rabbi Kahane's. They're Benjamin Kahane's. They're all Rabbi Kahane's principles, and they're now all accepted, although not under his name. And we have one in principle too. At Rabbi Kahane's final speech, I heard him say they will choose either Yasser Arafat or they will choose me. And if they choose Yasser Arafat, God help us. It will be awful. See the final speech. He predicts everything that is coming as he always did. The Jews in this country are our friends, and the Jews in Israel are our friends, and thank God there's Israel. We know who our enemies always have been. My father is 94. He survived the Holocaust. He broke out of concentration camps. He saved his 3 sisters alive as Catholics and then brought them to Israel as Jews. He helped 100 people escape the camps in France when all of France was on the side of Germany and the Nazis. He lost his parents and his elder sister to Auschwitz, and he fought in the independence war of Israel after the French underground. And he knows to this day that our enemies do not want peace. Rabbi Kahane knew this, and Benjamin Kahane knew this, and they wanted peace more than anyone. They didn't want Jew against Jew any more than they wanted Jews against Christians or Arabs. But they want Jews to live. They want Israel to live. How many here are ready to cede more of Israel in order for another treaty of peace? Raise your hands. Anyone? But what are you prepared to do about it? How many of you are prepared to see and hear the name of Rabbi Kahane and Benjamin Kahane be erased from all the annals of Israel? What are you prepared to do to get it back there? Can you wave the Kahane banner in Israel? Can you wear the Kahane face in Israel? Can you sell his books in Israel? Can the libraries of Israel have the prolific writings and scholarship and Torah study of Rabbi Kahane, a devoted friend of Rabbi Kalbach, whose music is heard all over the world? And Rabbi Kalbach thought just like Rabbi Kahane. I was a lawyer for both of them. I was not in the JDL, it was before me, but I became a lawyer for both Rabbi Kahane and Rabbi Kalbach. And they loved each other. The music of Rabbi Kahane was in his liturgy and his scholarship and his actions, and the music of Rabbi Kalbach helped with the liturgy and actions of Rabbi Kahane free Soviet Jewry. And Never Again is the title of a book by Rabbi Kahane from Beitar that's on sale. And now Never Again is heard all over the world except for the real purpose it was meant to convey. And that's in Israel, for the real purpose. He had the same principles as his father, a charismatic, unoffending person with the bravery of David. And he paid for it with his life. He never had one day of peace since his father was murdered. And he was as inoffensive as they come. I knew Mike Wallace, and I gave interviews to 60 Minutes, and I gave the opportunity to Benjamin Kahane to be on 60 Minutes and other notable press. And these interviews are out there. And he was up to the task, but you could see they posed no danger to anybody. They were an educational force, a religious force. The danger was the Muslim terrorism that grew and grew and grew from so-called road rage after the so-called Prozac incident with Nosser, to the road rage with Halberstam, to the Empire State assassination of 21 people attempted, where one died. And then we got the notebook and the diary that had been concealed for 10 years, where the one who shot everybody up admitted he was sent by the PLO to the Empire State Building. And they concealed it from us in 1997. And then there was the Cole, where I took students from Brooklyn, from Flatbush, on tour of the Cole and Memorial Day of that year, to tour them around the largest destroyer I ever saw. And I saw, where's the next port of call? And the Middle East, and the Arab lands, and the most dangerous place. And the head of that ship and the Navy had resigned in protest, but President Clinton insisted they go there. And after it was attacked, nothing was done about it. And President Bush took office and nothing was done about it, and then came 9/11. And all the Arabs you could see on TV in Israel, Palestinian so-called Arabs, rejoiced And the reports were that there wasn't one Arab taxi-driven vehicle to be found in the area on 9/11. Where was the investigation? It went on for years. Did it conclude anything? But you heard that Israel was involved in the attack on 9/11, and that it was an inside job. There's no end to the calumny. It is time that we act like Binyamin. It is time that we keep Israel on her toes, but we go to the friendship of Donald Trump, and we see the embassy is moved, and we support the new ambassador, and we reach out our hands to our brothers and sisters in Israel, now under siege by the entire world, led by, of all places, Senegal, who was getting aid from Israel when Senegal said we have to boycott Israel. Where do you have boycotts elsewhere? Where? Who else is boycotted? What other capital city is told that it's not the capital? Benjamin Kahane and Talia Kahane are crying out to us. Let us make sure their voices are still heard. Praise God. God bless America and Israel.